Hi, I don't know how many of you have actually physically held a financial report, annual financial report. You seem to see less and less of them around now. I guess because a lot of stuff, a lot of information, all of this information is provided to you on the company's website. Nevertheless, organizations, public organizations, have to disclose the financial dealings and the financial operations and outcomes of their business to the public, to the stockholders that hold or have some type of financial investment in their firm. That is a requirement in the United States for a corporation being established as a corporation. The need to disclose that information and the need for that information to be externally audited so that those stockholders, those people with interest in the firm, as well as others who are interested in the firm, potential stockholders or analysts or just society, can get a credible picture of the financial dealings and outcomes of the organization. So firms produce these types of statements. They obviously produce statements throughout the year, their quarterly reports and things like that. But it's that annual report that kind of gives you a lay of the land, if you will, of what has transpired in your organization. In the financial report, you are likely to see, of course, the financial statements of the firm, which include things like the balance sheet, which has the assets of the firm, the liabilities, as well as the equity, the holdings of the firm's stock, as well as retained earnings. The income statement, or what we used to call a profit and loss, kind of gives you an idea of what the firm made, as well as what the firm spent, kind of in basic terms, as well as some other supplemental types of statements, like cash flow statement, statement of retained earnings. All of these are to give us basically a general analysis and understanding of what is the state of the firm financially. And I must be honest with you, there are a lot of people out there that receive financial statements or look at financial statements and are a bit lost of exactly what these statements indicate. And the problem is that many people that receive these types of financial statements don't, or let me put it this way, aren't necessarily versed in reading and interpreting the data. It's kind of like this. If you were to be given your health sheet, if you went in for a checkup and let's say the doctor checked your cholesterol levels, your blood sugar levels, and all those things, and then provide you with the raw data, you would probably not be you would definitely be able to understand the day, or be able to visualize what it says. You can see the number 130, 135, 90, whatever. But you would probably not be able to interpret it because you do not necessarily know what that number signifies, what's a good level of cholesterol, what's a bad level of cholesterol, because you don't have that medical background. And it's kind of the same thing with financial statements in organizations. If you don't really understand certain ratios, what's a quick ratio, what's a leverage ratio, what's return on assets, return on equity, and as well as you aren't able to interpret what that information means in the context of the organization as well as the industry, that data is not very useful to you. And so oftentimes, rather than actually looking at the numbers, what people do is they look or they read through the narrative that is provided in the financial report, the annual report, as well as things like the chairman's message. Now, that's not necessarily bad, because if you want to think of those things like the narrative and the chairman's message, kind of like cliff notes, right? They give you an overview of what's happened. They give you kind of the highlights, and they allow you to understand to some degree the information without having to necessarily get into the nitty-gritty. It's kind of like when the doctor kind of goes over it, they say, okay, listen, this cholesterol is okay, but your heart rate's a little bit high. Your blood sugar is fine, but you got to look at your glucose. Great. layperson, we kind of get the gist of it. The problem there, when you look at it from the perspective of the annual report, is that the narrative in the chairman, although they're trying to be credible, and we're not going to question their credibility, even in the age of all these ethical suspicions and controversies. Most chairmen and most financial reports are written with a certain level of, prepared with a certain level of integrity, definitely. However, you must recognize that these people are also the promoters of their organizations, because they're writing these reports to not just inform, but also to help convince and influence stockholders and potential stockholders that all is well with the firm. Now, this is a good firm, that you should put your money here or keep your money here. So you have to be very, very cautious when you use just simply that type of information, a narrative or chairman's message, to help and guide you in understanding and analyzing an organization, okay? Really, you have to be aware of the numbers. But let me put it this way, even for those people who are aware of the numbers, who understand what the numbers mean and can interpret the numbers, even for those kinds of people, the financial statements aren't always as clear as you would think they would be. And the reason why is because firms can use different methods, okay, as you saw in your book. They can use different methods, different approaches, and can do some very, I would say, interesting things with their financial operations to present themselves in a better light. Now, not necessarily illegal things, but I use the term interesting things. Again, some of it might be just smoke and mirrors, trying to help to prepare and to present an image that they believe is going to be better received by stockholders, by the public. And so you have to be careful about that. And that's why we use terms like forensic accounting, kind of digging deeper. Yeah, I see that you've reported a current ratio. By the way, a current ratio is your current assets to liabilities. And what that is kind of a measure of how well the firm is able to repay its short-term debts. Does it have the assets in place here to kind of keep itself afloat, to keep the business going? That's the short-term current assets versus current liabilities. And a standard figure, a ratio level, if you will, for a company that's in kind of good standing, that's financially sound and is able to repay those short-term debts based on its current assets, is about 2. So 2 to 1. Your current assets should be about twice the amount of your current debt. Well, the firm can report a ratio like that. But what you may not know is that just before the report comes out, just before the figures are calculated, the firm, let's say, goes in and borrows a long-term debt. Okay, so as a long-term debt, borrows certain amount of money, and uses that to pay off some of its current liabilities. So here it is. The firm now has a lower level of current liabilities, and so when you look at the quick ratio, hey, looks good, right? We have less current liabilities, so our quick ratio goes up. It seems like we can cover our debts. However, in order to do that, we have increased our long-term debt. So our debt situation has not necessarily improved. In fact, it might have worsened. But if we just look at that ratio alone, or if we look at that ratio without really understanding how we came about those numbers, we can come up with the absolutely wrong interpretation. So it's just like a physical body, if you will. So some of you might be kind of interested in shows like CSI, where people go in and they try to kind of go underneath just the general information. Oh, okay, yeah, I see this is here. I see this person, seemed like they're suffocated. Well, why did they suffocate? Was there something inside them? Were they poisoned? That kind of thing. Same thing with the information, okay? Why is this firm reporting this type of profit? However, or this type of return on assets. But when we look deeper, what do we see here? Do we see a debt issue, a leverage issue? Is the firm highly leveraged? Is it borrowing too much? You know, is the firm having issues in terms of retiring debt? Is the firm paying dividends or not? Well, what's going on in terms of its cash flow? Is it running low on cash? Some of that. So you have to take all of this information together. And so one of the key things you must always remember when you're looking at financial reports is not just look at what I call the big numbers, but also look at those little numbers. Use a little footnotes, those little asterisks, like, oh yeah, this was kind of calculated this way, or we omitted, all very legal. But without that information, you don't get the whole picture. You know, when you see those ads for medicine, right? And they tell you how fantastic and wonderful, and then in a little fine print and kind of really quickly in the commercial, they say, okay, this can cost, da, 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 da. If you're not paying attention to that, you're going to miss the side effects. And it's the same thing with financial statements. So you really got, it's a science, but it's also an art. You've got to learn how to read it. You've got to obviously understand what the data stands for, what the ratio stands for, what the different accounts and the different the different terminologies are. And you need to understand how to interpret them in terms of what is good, what is bad, what are we trying to gather, you know, what does this demonstrate in terms of trends. And thirdly, and really importantly, you have to learn how to dig deeper. Really figure out and try to ascertain what's going on beyond and behind the numbers. So don't let numbers scare you. Don't let financial statements scare you. If you understand, you interpret, and you analyze, you're going to be in a much better shape in terms of really appreciating what's going on in the firm financially.